Basic Education Department has also decided to withdraw its teachers' incentive policy. The decades-long policy was created to motivate teachers to work in rural areas for monetary incentives. The department, cites budgetary constraints as part of the reasons why this policy has now come to an end. Let's get more on this now. Bring in Minister Angie Motshekga, who joins us via our video link. Minister, it's always great to have you on the program. Thank you for your time. Before we speak about this policy, it would be remiss for me not to perhaps even just get your initial take around what we know has taken place there at Effingham Secondary School. In case you weren't able to listen to our reporter, Karinda Jacques-Mahan, the school today in Durban has been closed, and that comes on the back of allegations that learners at that school were using illegal substances. But the controversy is also around security personnel at that institution pointing a firearm several times at some of the pupils there. We're still trying to piece together the exact circumstances, but from what we know, it's certainly not ideal what's taking place there.
No, thank you very much, and thank you very much for having me. I just had a morning meeting before this meeting and would have missed that interview, so I've just connected now at 8:15. I was at the meeting from 7, so I'm sorry I missed that. I'm not aware and familiar with the facts. But on the issue generally, on substance abuse and just general decadence in our schools, it's a very worrying factor, and we're trying to work with all partners involved because it is a mammoth challenge that requires not only ourselves as a sector and the parents, but just a community, including the police. But it is a big problem. Substance abuse in schools.
It goes without saying, Minister, I guess, that your department will be looking into this.
No, definitely.
All right.
Definitely.
Sure. Well, thanks for that. We did call you to speak about, the decision to do away with the teacher incentive policy. As I mentioned there, part of what the policy is aiming to do is to encourage, I guess, teachers to take up posts in rural areas. Without this policy, how are you going to do that?
Yeah, and the policy had become completely unsustainable in terms of, especially for rural provinces. If you look at a province like Limpopo, KZ and Eastern Cape, they are predominantly rural provinces. So we are saying every 2/3 of your teachers must get this incentive. And those provinces are finding it difficult to sustain that incentive. And Westfield were not even able to finance all the people that are there. So which means it was come first, come serve, and then the other people would not be able to access the fund because we ran out of resources to sustain the program. So it's unsustainable. Not all the teachers in rural areas, the majority of teachers in rural areas were not receiving it. It's the few that managed to access it. So I don't see too much of a crisis because in any case, in those provinces, the most teachers in rural areas are already there. The only difference is that we are not able now to continue funding those that we're funding, because in any case, we're not funding all the teachers that are in rural schools.
How much of a gap is that going to leave when you think about the cohort of teachers you have in rural communities in the event that those who no longer get the incentive decide to walk away?
No, I don't want to underestimate. I mean, if we really had the resources, I think we would have loved to incentivize all the teachers. But from our discussions with provinces, we don't as yet see any problem because, as I say, in any case, in those provinces, the majority of teachers are already in those rural areas and are not getting the incentives. And only about 25% are getting incentives. So we will see how the other 25% reacts. Our biggest problem now was that the other 75% not receiving it were pressing for it and saying it's discrimination, which was true. And because we can't afford it, we thought that let's withdraw it from everybody and use that money for some of the pressing challenges that we have as a sector. And it is unfortunate, but as I say, we don't have the resources to sustain it.
Did I hear you correctly, Minister? Did you say 25% of the teacher cohort in rural areas relied on this incentive? That means if they all walk away, that's 25% of your capacity gone.
No, not that relied. That incentive, as you said, it's on top of their salary.
Right. The point I was trying to make is that, yes, some of these teachers don't rely on this incentive, but for many of them, this could be a deal breaker. In other words, stopping the incentive could lead to them walking away. And if that's 25% potentially of the teachers who walk away, that's not a small gap.
No, it is. And I really don't want to sound insensitive. It's one decision that we took, I think, painfully so, but the reality is that those rural provinces say they are unable to sustain it. So it's either they don't get paid at all, even for what their basic salary, or we accept that the incentive was unfortunately benefiting a few and we're unable to pay it to all other people. And it is an incentive truly, and I'm sure people had really planned their lives around it. But the truth of the matter is the provinces reported that they're unable to sustain the incentive.
Have you been able to gauge the reaction from teachers who are going to be affected by this?
We have tabled the matter because it was a decision of my predecessor, the minister, and I don't want to say we can easily, I think as a department, withdraw it. We have put it before your Council of Education, of Council of Educators, and we'll hear from there as we engage with them. But the first thing that had to happen was to state our intentions that rural provinces say they are unable to sustain the incentive, and an incentive was to incentivize you to go in the rural areas at that time when we were unable to get lots of people. So we'll see what happens if teachers abandon their posts, if we're able to get people to replace them. I really don't want to say it's a light thing, but the fact of the matter is we were unable to sustain it and took a decision that the fairest thing is that 75% can't get it. You can't privilege only 25%.
Of course, the list of issues in the basic education department are long. You know, you really are spoiled for choice in terms of what you focus your limited budget on. We're speaking about these incentives on the back of your budget, which was tabled recently. What is the main priorities that you're focusing on in this constrained budget?
You know, main priorities and everything else that we do should help us to continue to provide quality and effective education. And you will be aware that that's one of our biggest challenge in the sector, and there are lots of factors which really affect our ability to provide a quality education. Is to continue to train our teachers in innovative skills in areas, new areas that we're moving into, but also to look at our infrastructure, because one of the biggest problems that we have in the sector is overcrowding. I mean, this morning when I say we had a meeting, I mean, the report I got last Monday was that we need about more than 15,000 classrooms just to deal with overcrowding in our schools. So infrastructure is a major issue. But our main driver all the time is around quality education and looking at everything else that would help us to achieve that, but also anything that tends to interfere with it. So we're looking at assessments, looking at our ways of assessing and see how we improve them, our teacher development, infrastructure to give us a proper environment, but more than anything also to innovate and make sure that we skill our children to be able to deal with the current challenges that face them, technology, diversified skills, and skills for the future, skills for future work. So curriculum is key, teacher development is key, infrastructure is key, but also our learner well-being, their safety, their psychosocial situation, because as I said, because of pressures outside, they also tend to impact on the schools and impact on our children. So we are also pressed in terms of ensuring that we provide adequate psychosocial services to deal with teenage pregnancy, with substance abuse, with violence, with bullying. So those are all the issues that really impact on quality and effective learning, but also on the well-being of our children.
All right, Minister Angie Motshekga, thanks very much indeed for speaking to us. That's the time we have for today's discussion. I appreciate your weighing in. Angie Motshekga is the Minister of Basic Education.